This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 23 of season 2 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, June 5th, 1909. I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford 114 years ago as we read. The first section is the About Town section. Westford Grange was well represented at Concord Grange Tuesday evening. Two barge loads left Westford Center at 5:30. Others went by private team. 54 in all went over. This including the ladies' degree team, who worked the third degree with a promptness and elasticity of manner and movement that has not been equaled. On the return trip, the large dome at the Concord Reformatory served as a guide to a barge load of 4 that they were not headed direct towards their own home door. Acton, Littleton, Chelmsford, Carlisle, and Lexington Granges were invited and were liberally represented, as well as other Granges not specially invited. Concord Grange furnished ice cream with its usual alluring temptation, free in its liberality from any chilly sensation. Samuel L. Taylor had the first mess of peas of the season, Tuesday, June 1st. They were neither bought, borrowed, nor hired, but the really genuine outdoor winter-planted Taylor pea that is warranted to get there first every time, raised on a patch remote from the farm, which he had forgotten about when he wrote the last yarn. Come on now, you Stony Brook farmers, and Smith of Graniteville by name, what makes you so poky, slow, and lame? Some of Sam Taylor's humor and his poetry. Charles Philbrick, the blacksmith at Westford Station, has moved from North Chelmsford into the cottage of John H. Decatur on the Lowell Road. Mrs. Samuel L. Taylor, Esther Perry Snow, and Perry Taylor Snow left Tuesday for the sunny, salubrious, sandy attractions of New Jersey. Band concerts every night and all rainy days by the old-time, ever-present Mosquito, that the state at much expense is unable to prevent entertaining with its song and biting with its prong. Arthur O'Brien, an old-time Stony Brook scholar and brother of James H. O'Brien on the Stony Brook Road, is seriously and hopelessly ill at his home in South Framingham, the result of a paralytic shock, what we would call a stroke. Henry B. Reed, R-E-A-D, has been resting preparatory to haying. While thus resting, he has been entertaining Dr. Varney, who said it was nothing serious or alarming, and that he might go plain farming, simply tonsillitis that had alighted, a brief introduction to its foes, such as the doctor knows, and it withdrew without prolonged adieus. A little bit more of his poetry. Among those in town Decoration Day was our old-time citizen of Stony Brook School Association, Edwin E. Haywood of Lexington, as ever still youthful and buoyant of spirit, although past the 70 limit. He is wisely guiding his trend towards the 80. John A. Taylor gave a reading by invitation of Dunstable friends at a church entertainment in that town Friday evening, May 28th. The ball game Decoration Day between the Westford team and the Wanderers of Lowell resulted in a victory for the town team by a score of 10-5. In the same line of goods, last Saturday, the Stars of Brookside defeated the Grays of Westford by a score of 7-5. The next section is Westford Center. Mr. and Mrs. Alva Bicknell of Somerville were visitors at Mr. and Mrs. David L. Grieg's Fairview Farm Monday. The Fairview Farm was located on Main Street across the road from Fairview Cemetery. It was later owned by the builder in town, Hicks. Judge and Mrs. F.A. Fisher of Lowell have the sincere sympathy of their Westford friends in their sorrow from the death of their baby daughter, Lois. She died May 27th, aged 6 months and 1 day, from peritonitis. The assessors have completed their work of taking the inventory of taxable property in town, and with the result are busy making up the taxes at the town hall. William F. Karkin of Marlborough, New Hampshire, was the guest of his brother, Warren, over Sunday and Monday. Mr. Karkin is chauffeur for Henry M. Follinsby, superintendent of the George B. Webb Construction Company of that place. Mrs. Alfred W. Hartford attended the funeral of her grandfather, Almon Hawkes, in South Deerfield Saturday of last week. Mr. Hawkes was a nonagenarian, being 94 years of age, and up to within the last year of his life was remarkably well for a man of his years. He died May 26th and was a veteran of the Civil War. He was the father of Wesley Hawkes. I'm surprised that's not mentioned here. Edward Abbott, J. Herbert Fletcher, and William A. Woodward enjoyed a fishing trip this past week to Francistown, New Hampshire, going in Mr. Abbott's automobile. Mrs. Woodward took this opportunity to visit former friends in Milford, New Hampshire. Mr. and Mrs. William Sutherland and son William of Lynn were guests at William Sutherland's in this village over Sunday and Monday. This represented 3 generations of William Sutherlands. Mr. and Mrs. Lyman E. Wilkins drove up from their Cambridge home with their fine driving horse and spent the holiday at H.G. Osgood's. The next section is accident. Clarence, Mr. and Mrs. Henry Colburn's little 3-year-old son, had a narrow escape from serious injury Monday, if not from being killed outright. He was on the common with his parents not a moment before, but with the swiftness of the average small youngster got into the street and right in the path of a horse and carriage coming at a brisk pace. Before the occupants of the carriage really saw him, he was right under the horse's feet. Those who saw the accident said it seemed as though the horse was possessed with one of those splendid streaks of equine intelligence and managed every way to keep his hoofs from coming down on the child. He was quickly rescued, and Dr. Wells was summoned, and upon examination found nothing worse than a fright and some slight bruises and scratches. Clarence is a popular little fellow, and his many friends are thankful for him and his parents for his narrow escape. The next section is the Westford Grange section. The rally night of Neighbors' Night of Concord Grange took place Tuesday evening in their historic town hall. The delegation from Westford Grange numbered 52, and they were conveyed in 2 large barges, one in charge of Fred A. Smith and the other of Will E. Wright, besides a good number who went in their own teams. In this time period, everybody traveled, just about everybody, by horse and carriage. It was a pretty good distance to go for an evening visitation, but the perfect moonlight evening was a great help towards its accomplishment. The ladies' degree staff of Westford exemplified the 3rd degree by special invitation upon a class of 8 candidates, and the regular officers of Concord Grange attended to the 4th degree. The Westford staff were at a little disadvantage in a strange hall, but performed the work with many additional features in their best manner, which won them many hearty encomiums. At the conclusion of the degree work, refreshments of ice cream and cake and fruit lemonade were served to the large gathering. There was a delegation of 42 from Acton, 44 from Carlisle, and other Granges represented with smaller groups were Lexington, Chelmsford, Boxborough, Stowe, Littleton, and Billerica, making a total of fully 250. The next section is Memorial Day. The beautiful weather and the successful carrying out of the day's plans made the, quote, Day of Memories, end quote, successful and enjoyable, notwithstanding the undercurrent of sadness this day brings to many hearts, to the GAR men, and to many others, particularly to those who decorated mounds made in God's acre since last Memorial Day. The veterans decorated every soldier's grave in the 4 cemeteries, either Sunday or Monday, with flowers and a flag which signifies so much to the soldier heart. The day exercises began at 9 o'clock when the procession formed at the town hall and proceeded to Fairview Cemetery. Captain Sherman H. Fletcher, was chief marshal, and the veterans in barges were escorted by the National Military Band of 25 pieces, the sons of veterans, and a large company of school children carrying flowers for the use of the veterans. Upon arrival at the cemetery, the ritualistic service of the GAR was carried out in charge of Commander Wesley O. Hawks. His heart was probably heavy, as his own father, a Civil War veteran, had died on May 26th. Upon returning to the hall, the program of the day was carried out with smoothness and efficiency. The Honorable Herbert E. Fletcher was the orator of the day and gave an address that was followed with the closest appreciation and attention by the large audience. John Adams Taylor, whom Commander Hawks introduced as one of, quote, our boys, end quote, and who has just accepted a position in a Western university, rendered, quote, the perfect tribute, end quote, in a way that won him the heartiest applause of the audience. Mrs. Armand of Graniteville repeated, by special request of the veterans, the story she gave the day previous of the little bronze button. The little bronze button referred to here was the emblem of members of the Grand Army of the Republic, the Civil War Veterans Organization. Traditionally, it was made of cannon metal captured from the Confederates. It was proudly worn in the left lapel of their coat by members of the GAR who had been honorably discharged from the Union Army. There is a poem titled The Little Bronze Button by Gustav Junghans, which is perhaps what was read at this service. The rest of the program consisted of selections by the band and the Orion Quartet of Lowell, the members of which are such favorites with the Westford audience. The exercises closed with the singing of America by the audience and band. The dinner in the lower hall of our town hall at the time, in charge of caterer Fred A. Smith, was an enjoyable part of the celebration and was partaken of by fully 150 people. In the afternoon, the Nashua Military Band gave a fine concert on the Common from 2 to 4. Listening to the music was interspersed with much friendly social visitation. There were fully 250 people in attendance. A supper was served to the men of the band in the lower hall at the close of the afternoon's exercises, which closed the day's formal program. The next paragraph is about Graniteville. Herbert G. Horn, better known as Bert to his many friends here, has been a recent visitor in this village. Bert was an attendant at the ball game Saturday and remarked that the present club did not come up to the original Graniteville team that included Johnson, Eaton, King, Gilson, and other well-known local players, who met the strongest teams in this section and went through 2 seasons with only 1 defeat. Next is another item on memorial services from the Graniteville viewpoint, apparently. The Union Memorial Services, in which the First Parish and Congregational Churches of Westford met with the Methodist Episcopal Church of this village, were held Sunday morning at 10:45 o'clock. The members of the Westford Veterans Association, Wesley O. Hawks, commander, with the Sons of Veterans, marched to the church in a body to drum music furnished by William L. Wall. The church was completely filled on this occasion, many being present from out of town. The choir was augmented for this service, many singers from the 3 different churches in the town taking part. Miss Emily Prynne was organist. After the service, luncheon was served in the church vestry to the veterans and the Sons of Veterans. After luncheon had been served, the veterans journeyed to the West St. Catherine's and Wright cemeteries, where the graves of the dead comrades were decorated. At the 9:45 o'clock Mass in St. Catherine's Church Sunday morning, the pastor, Reverend Edmund T. Schofield, took occasion to make a few remarks on the great work accomplished by the members of the GAR and gave a short sermon on Memorial Day. The last paragraph is on baseball. The Crescent Baseball Club of Lowell visited here last Saturday afternoon and met the Graniteville Blues in the first game in the Stony Brook League at Hillside Park before a good-sized crowd, considering the weather condition. The game was started in a drizzling rain and continued until the 7th inning, when the sudden downpour put an end to all playing, the local club having the better of the argument by the score of 7-4. Both clubs played good ball, and it seemed too bad that the game could not have been finished. Hanson, Gilson, and Ledwith led with the stick for the local club, while Cadell of the Crescents did some heavy batting. The features of the game were the fine fielding of Bostic for the Lowell boys and the battery work of McCarthy and Ledwith for the Graniteville team. The Blues appeared in their new uniforms and made a fine appearance. And that's the news in Westford for the week ending June 5th, 1909. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Nick Woodbury of WestfordCAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and podcasts from the Westford Wardsman at our website at museum.westford.org, or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from a century ago. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.